So the short and obvious answer is that digital platforms, play a critical role in misinformation and disinformation, and we can understand them having sort of a systemic effect and an effect at the level of the individual user. So digital platforms, the ones that dominate our lives, for Google, Facebook, Instagram, they work. The economic logic of those platforms is to keep us on the platform, engaged with content, and exposing us to ads. That's how they make money. And that lends itself to the algorithmic systems that run these platforms and the content that we see, the algorithms that decide which content they show us. That economic logic lends itself to showing us the most evocative, the most alarmist, the most sort of engaging content, which makes room for misinformation and disinformation to come in. So that's the broader systemic function of how these systems work. But then also we can look at the level of the individual users' experience on a platform, and the design features that we encounter when we use platforms, what the platforms let us do on there. And they also play a role in this ecosystem of disinformation and misinformation. And essentially what I'm talking about here is there's what's happening, which from my discipline, what we see is happening is that there's this kind of collective endorsement of information that happens on platforms. So if I encounter something on Facebook that says there's mercury in the vaccines or 5G is dangerous, and I see that 500 people have liked it and 60 people have shared it, people often take that as a collective endorsement of that information being true. It's like, oh, okay, that must be serious, that must be true. And we see that effect, that this sort of, a lot of people are saying it, so therefore it must have some credibility. We see that coming up in the research as playing a significant role in this sort of disinformation infrastructure online.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And you write about it as being kind of like a social activity, which I found really fascinating. And I think, Lee, that fits in neatly with what you write in your book about the amplifiers in this whole process.
Yeah, there's a pipeline with disinformation. It starts with the disinformers who have something that they want, money, power, advance their ideology. It goes next to the amplifiers who take that message and send it out to a wider audience, sometimes to a micro-targeted audience, which is the opposite of what you'd think is broadcasting it widely. But the ability to micro-target is actually quite scary, because then you're finding exactly the audience that you want to hear your message. And then finally, the other side of the pipeline are the believers, the victims, the people who are not really getting anything out of believing it, but they believe it nonetheless because they think that it's true. And the interesting part of that pipeline for me is, if you think about, and I know we're not ready to talk about solutions yet, but I'll just put this on the table. If you think about it, cracking down on the amplification is going to be, I think, the most effective way. How do you get disinformers to stop sharing disinformation? It's hard, because they're an advantage. They want it. And some of them are foreign. I mean, what can anybody in Australia or the United States do to get Vladimir Putin to stop sharing disinformation? I'm not sure there is anything. On the other end of it, how do you get people not to believe disinformation when they hear it? There are some remedial steps you can take. Some of them even work, but they're not enough. I think that if we're going to solve the problem of disinformation, it has to be where we take that pipe and we pinch it in the middle and we keep the amplification down, because without amplification, disinformation is worthless.